Don't test that stereo.
This is the Iron Sharpens Iron Show with your host, Latrice Cook.
Good afternoon, KAZI listeners. You are tuned into the Iron Sharpens Iron Show, and I am your host, Latrice Cook, on this fabulous Wednesday afternoon. I have got it down pat now. I've been saying morning for the last couple of shows, but I am so elated that I've got afternoon now in my mind, and it's actually coming out of my mouth. So thank you all so much for your listenership and your support of the Iron Sharpens Iron Show and myself, Latrice Cook, here at the KAZI Studios, 88.7 FM. Shout out to the Mel Center staff who is listening intently. Thank you all for being the best part of the organization. If you have questions or concerns and you've been previously incarcerated and or a family member of one, you can reach us at 512-473-2525, 512-473-2525. That is the Mel Center, in existence for 19 plus years. So we got to give a shout out just for longevity in this space. And as you all know, this is the season of turkey and holiday time and all like that, and and a Black Friday, aka White Friday, and my business. So we're getting ready for all these things. And so I just want to say to all of you all, as we're thinking about this particular season and we are approaching the holiday season, to keep in mind those persons that are struggling with the ill of having a felonious background, being excluded still from the things and opportunities that many of us may take for granted that we have, because we haven't had that infraction put onto our lives. So keep those persons in mind, and how maybe you can be a help to them, some type of assistance to them during this season. So I'm back here, and I'm excited because on next week we are doing our fundraising event in Dallas at the Fluvog shoe store, which I have on my Fluvogs this afternoon. And so, I just want to let you all know, until you've had this experience, you ain't wearing no shoes. So you need to come and think about supporting us. If you are in the Dallas area listening, please be a part of our event on next Friday afternoon into the nighttime. We plan on having an excellent and a wonderful time. I always have somebody flavorful in the building with me and, co-piloting with me. I have a young man that I met several years ago. I don't know how long I've known him now. But before I introduce him, I just kind of want to give you a little bit of background about the space of working in criminal justice and around issues that negatively plague our community. It's important to have people that have voices that are committed to this work, regardless of whether you're paid in the space or not. I think that it takes a special person to be in these spaces, not just getting in these spaces because dollars are there, but getting in these spaces because you really understand the magnitude of having a voice for change, for equity, for justice. And so I'm always glad to have people around me, and I have a lot of respect for people who are in this work and in this space, because it is always a lot of work. It's a lot of hours. It's all these things. And, when they have all this energy because they're still young, you really embrace them, and you really want to promote that, because their wins a little bit longer now than definitely than mine, and they have a new and a more, I would say sometimes more of an innovative perspective on how to deal with some of these challenges. Okay, so I'm going to introduce him in just a second, but I also want to talk about just the fact that the elections happened last night. Woo! So some people are successful and they don't have to go into a runoff, and then there are those of you who have to go into a runoff. And so, congratulations to the winners, all those people who put in the work or stole the votes or whatever it was you did to get in your place. So, we want to give a shout out out to those persons. And for those of you who have to continue in this process, I'm asking everybody to go back and vote again. It's important that you get back and vote again, because your vote does matter. And so if you missed it, for whatever reasons that you missed it, you will have another opportunity for those races that are gone into a runoff, which I'm not sure which all of those are, but maybe at some point or another, this young man who, basically cheated on me and went on and got married and all these things, but I'm going to let him make it with that. But he's in the studio, and maybe he'll be able to kind of discuss that a little bit. 512-836-2887 if you want to join the conversation. Don't forget about supporting KAZI in the 40 by 40 efforts. Please give your tax deductible donation. You can call, you can send it via mail, or you can even do that online. So please, if you want any information about that, Miss Juliet is sitting waiting on you to call with your information. Chris Harris is a native Texan, proud son, and passionate advocate, working to upend our unjust status quo by dismantling systems of surveillance, punishment, and exclusion, and building systems of support, accountability, and restoration. He currently serves as the policy director for the Austin Justice Coalition and volunteers for numerous organizations and causes in Austin. Chris has contributed to winning campaigns aimed at limiting racial disparities in the criminal legal system, police violence, criminalization of poverty, immigrant detentions, pretrial incarceration, subpar indigent defense, and investment in police and prisons. Chris was born in Sulphur Springs, Texas, and raised in the Metroplex. He enjoys consuming news, the NBA. He thinks he can play ball, and tacos in unhealthy quantities, listening to hip hop and soul music, and dropping dimes and feathery jump hooks on the basketball court. Good afternoon, Chris Harris.
Thank you for leading all that.
So happy to have you in this place.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so you just shared with me, and I want to tell Chris needs to give a shout out. Chris just recently was married, and of course I didn't get invited to it, and I found out about it on the rip. And so I don't come to stuff unless I'm invited. But had I known that, I probably would have crashed with it and said, "Hey." But shout out to Mrs. Harris, brand new. How long you been married now?
Just got married in June.
Wow.
Yeah. And we actually did have one crasher. So you would fit right in. You would have welcome. No question.
Chris, I know that typically when we're in conversation, it's typically around issues and stuff that are happening in and around our county and around our country. Mm-hmm. And so before we really get into where you are now at Austin Justice Coalition, Chris Harris already had a name and already was very entrenched in the work. So who is Chris Harris?
Ooh, goodness. That's a great question. So I am a native Texan, born in Sulphur Springs, as you read. I spent the first 9 years of my life in Commerce, Texas, which is where my mother and father met in college at what was then East Texas State University and is now Texas A&M in Commerce. When I was 9, my mom and I moved into Dallas. She wanted me to be in better schools. And so we moved into the city. I actually went into Richardson schools, but we lived right there on the Dallas border. And then I studied politics in school. Thought I was gonna do some good in the world. I had a job right out of college in D.C. Working for a think tank, and I hated it. If you think I'm idealistic now, you should have seen me at 23.
He's not much older than that.
Yeah, no, much older now. And so I had some family here. My dad, my half brother, my stepmom were here in Austin, and so I just figured out how I could move down here. I went to private school for college, so I had way too many loans. Mm-hmm. And I moved here and took whatever job I could get so I could start paying them off. Mm-hmm. And plot my way back into doing the work that I always envisioned I would do, mm-hmm. work that would be helpful. And once I paid my loans off, that's what I did. I quit my job. I started volunteering, doing the work wherever I could get it. And eventually it did turn into jobs, like the one I got now. But yeah, and I think, my journey into the work is definitely one that's part personal and part like intellectual, right? Like, I got family, I got people that been impacted by these systems, like almost everybody. I will say I didn't really think a lot of it when I was a kid. I thought, like most people, shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
That's it sucks. It's clearly like it's a lot on all of us, but it's not. There's not something bigger here. It really took a lot of reading, some mentors, all that stuff for me to really understand, how so many of these systems have impacted my people, my family over the course of generations, and how they really fit into these systems we all know are wrong, into slavery, into Jim Crow. And so, it's really, and then it's movements, it's people building, see the Gen 6, see Trayvon, see Eric Garner, Ferguson, Mike Brown, and each step of the way, learn a little bit more, hear a little bit more, connect with more people, and so all of that really brought me to where I am.
So initially you got into the work just because this was a passion that you had fostered, just watching things happen.
Yeah, mostly. I did have a radio show. So when I moved here and I actually worked in the tech world, again, trying to pay my loans off. But I was craving that community and that doing something. So I had a radio show actually on Co-op for a little while, and I would have people in the community doing work come on the show. So that was kind of my my connection here locally, and me trying to like establish things, and it really helped, right? Because then once I did quit my job and really want to start doing the work, I did know a lot of folks because a lot of people had come on my show. So, but yeah, it was hearing what other people were doing. It was seeing what other people out there are doing and building and how they were mobilizing. That really inspired me.
And from that inspiration, where was your first? I know you are the policy director now at Austin Justice Coalition, but I talked to you even before that time, way before that time. You were entrenched with other organizations and stuff. And so before I talk about where you are currently, I want to go back and I want to ask, what was your first supported issue that you took that was big, if I can say that, in the city or in Travis County? That
Sure. Yeah. So I really,
besides fair chance hiring, which I feel like still to this day has no teeth, but that's a whole nother story.
Oh, don't get me started.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So when I was working in the tech world, I didn't like it. It was intellectually stimulating, but I was always like, feeling like I wasn't doing what I needed to do and wasn't able to contribute to the world the way I wanted to. But in reality, some of the skills I learned there really helped me. So the first thing, to answer your question, was I quit my job. I was out just trying to catch on, do whatever, support however I could, and some folks at Grassroots Leadership came to me. They had 6,000 pages of PDFs they had gotten from the county with everybody who had been incarcerated over the previous year in the county. And they were like, they won't give us into a spreadsheet. What are we gonna do with this? How do we do? Can we do something with
What do we do?
And so, I had
I forgot you were at Grassroots. Okay.
I had some skills with that sort of thing, and some skills with data analysis and stuff I picked up, while I was waiting to do what I really wanted to do. And again, some of those skills proved really helpful. So I was able to really break all that data down and put together this report, which was that came out in 2017, and it was a breakdown of jail bookings in Travis County in 2015, and it really just showed the continued racial disparities across the board that permeated the county at that time, and in many ways still do, and it really helped plot a blueprint in a lot of ways. Many of the recommendations that a bunch of folks collectively contributed to as once we digested the report and figured out what it said and what it meant, are a lot of the things that have subsequently happened in the community since then. Talking about, stop and arrest for a lot of low-level stuff, which we saw, again, drastic racial disparities of who gets a ticket when you can get a ticket and who gets arrested. Public Defender's Office, that was part of the recommendations of that report. We didn't have one, biggest city in the country not to have one until we got it in 2019. So, and there's a few other things like that. So that was by far the first big thing that I was involved in with the work.
You are tuned in to the Iron Sharpens Iron show on KAZI 88.7, and the infamous Chris Harris is sitting here, and I just want you to keep it locked to the left, and we'll be right back to you. 512-836-2887. We'll And we are back. You are tuned into the Iron Sharpens Iron show, and I'm your host, Latrice Cook, in the studio with Chris Harris. I want to keep saying of the Austin Justice Coalition, but Chris is so he's such a monumental person in his own right without being attached. I think a lot of times we get attached to where we are, what umbrella we sit under, and those umbrellas are strengthened only by the people that they have under them or that are in them. Not Austin Justice Coalition. I do want to say this. I think about this a lot just because I remember when the founder, one of the founders, Chaz Moore, I remember when he first started out, and the humility that he had and the consistent fight that was in him about the issues surrounding the policing. And he was probably one of the first young voices that I can remember, that I can recollect, that was really that in your face about it. And the fact that he's still very passionate about that particular issue specifically speaks a lot, because that is also a very dangerous that's a very dangerous position to stand in and be in opposition of the police officers and the police force. And so, shout out to him for his commitment to make a difference and to create such a great organization. And I don't want to say it solely, because I know Fatima at one point was a co-founder as well. But, for him to stay in the saddle and create such a wonderful organization with so many great things. So shout out to Chaz. And speaking of that, you're coming into Austin Justice Coalition, which I don't know how long you've been there and stuff now. Has it allowed you to still be as fluid in the issues that you have been so much a part of in our community?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, there's a complicated answer to that probably. The last couple jobs I had before Austin Justice Coalition, even though they didn't start off that way necessarily, they ended up me having to work a lot at the Ledge, at the Texas Legislature, which is not my forte. not a place I like to be if I can avoid it. And so, when I came to Austin Justice Coalition, which it was last September, so a little over a year now, I think for me it was, okay, I want to figure out, how we can do the legislative session a little differently. And every time I did it, basically, I gained 20 pounds and lost some friends and didn't love life for 5-6 months. So let's figure out how we can engage with this differently, and come in with maybe some different goals and milestones. And I think, I'm now it's around the corner, so I'm not sure how that's going to play, but we're trying, we're working on it. The other main things that I really wanted to do, as much as you comment on me being younger, I'm getting up there, and I've been in this for a little bit now, and I really, really wanted to focus on youth development and bringing new people into the work.
Good, yes.
And so I've been really, really pleased. We got started this in October of this year with our Radical Advocates Academy. We've got 7 folks in our cohort. Actually, all different age ranges and people, that are different topic areas that they're really passionate about, and we're, training them up to on skills as well as on, politics, and then they're going to help with us at the Ledge as well as do some local work in the summertime, and that's really feeding me right now, honestly.
Nice.
So, and then the third thing is, and now I'm not the criminal justice policy director at Austin School. I'm the policy director, and AJC works on housing justice issues, works on education justice issues, mobility justice, and so yeah, I've got some people that I'm working with, and trying to help as they really tackle those issues. And
shout out to JP for one, yeah,
and Amber Watts,
yes.
No question, and so. No, the answer to your question is probably no, but it's not necessarily because I'm forced to take a step back. It's because, hey, I'm working on this youth development stuff. I'm really trying to help AJC expand the areas where we're really engaged and fighting for justice in the community. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, there's probably been a slight step back for me on the criminal justice stuff. But a lot of it was stuff that I really wanted to do. Yep.
So and that's kind of depressing to hear from me, because of course my whole focus, and I think a lot of times people ask me about being involved in this and that and the third, but I try to stay in my lane, which I wish a lot of organizations would do that. Stay in your lane where you have the best expertise in, and stop trying to jump into lanes so you can get money and funding and stuff like this, and going into and actually polluting it more and making things worse because you're jumping in it with no experience, or trying to hire someone who has lived experience, who has no professional experience in doing anything. I mean, I really tire of that, and I try not to I talk about the part of the criminal policy and the criminal justice piece a lot, because the needle has moved so little. I've been out here 19 years. Every show I have that has one, I tell people this all the time. I've been out here 19 years, and to still be talking about a person who has had a felony or has a felonious background, has gone to prison or not, but has a felony, cannot lease an apartment, cannot sign a lease. 19 years later, you're not telling me that the people at the Ledge who have the power to make some changes at the real estate commission so it'll come off of the applications, you're not going to make me believe that this isn't deliberate, and that this has it could not have changed by now.
Yeah, no, I feel that entirely, and I think it's something that we're really trying to do as intentionally as we can. So with our housing justice program, like one of the campaigns we're working right now, the Housing Authority, right, has released new rules that are going to decrease some of the look-back periods and make it a little easier for folks with criminal history to actually get access to their housing.
Shout out to Mike Gerber.
Yeah, and of course that's big, not just for folks that access that housing, but you look around at other apartments and other people, they say, well, if the Housing Authority won't let those folks in, why should we let those folks in? And so right now, we're trying to organize some folks to support these changes and make sure that they come into effect. So there's still a criminal justice lens on it, and I think I agree wholeheartedly that can be a dynamic where groups will try to branch out some they don't know about, just to try to dip into that funding pool that's there for that. And I will say that that's undeniably true, and it's a big problem. And so much of the work of criminal justice, when we get down to it, The folks will say, the sheriff or the prosecutors or the county commissioners, they'll say, well, this isn't us. This is us responding to the lack of housing. This is us responding to the lack of mental health care. This is us responding to the lack of, all these other different needs in the community, education. And so we're trying to say, okay, well, let's help build up those things too.
Yeah, let's strengthen those. So
right,
yes.
so that you can't use that as an excuse anymore when we come and say, you need to let these people out of jail. You need to stop arresting these folks. So it is definitely a delicate balance, and I think we're trying to pursue it with fidelity, and also just like what do we know and what do we, so that we're not trying to talk out of turn or get involved in something that we're not educated about.
512-836-2887 in the studio with Chris Harris of Austin Justice Coalition. Chris, tell us about the. Kathy Mitchell reached out to me and was talking to me a little bit about the current state of the police. I want you to kind of jump in and let's spend a little bit of time talking about what you all continue to believe is the problem with the police, the Austin Police Department's upcoming contract. What has happened with the Office of Oversight?
Yeah, so it's an ongoing struggle here in Texas, and there's a few other states that are like this too, but especially in Texas, we have a situation where our oversight of police and a lot of the transparency and accountability of police is governed by the contract that's negotiated between the police association or the police union and that city, whatever that city is, and this is a big issue because what it means is that ultimately that a majority of police have to agree to whatever system gets put in place, right? And unfortunately, while there's some willingness on their part for a little bit of oversight, a little bit of transparency, on the whole they always will fight and never agree to a system that's really going to do the things that we need to set up where we're really deterring police misconduct and brutality. Where if you know that if you commit brutality or misconduct, that you'll get found out, and that ultimately there'll be some on the job. And I want to note this is only on the job. This has nothing to do with the district attorney or the prosecutors or anything like that. There'll be some on the job consequence, and so in 2017, many of us really worked to try to improve the police contract, and we did get some gains to the system then. And then over the course, not good enough, but gains, better than it had ever been. And then over the course of that contract, culminating last December, the police association kept filing grievances against the police oversight office, saying they were overstepping their bounds. They were doing too much. They shouldn't do this. They shouldn't do that. And in December of last year, they got an arbitrator to agree with them. And they stripped the oversight office of many of the powers that they had. And again, this wasn't like the strongest oversight in the country. This is just, this is good for Texas. And
all Texas is going to allow it to happen, huh?
Right. And so now we're in a situation where the office is really not strong at all. It's just an intake. So if you put in a complaint right now, they really can't do much with it. They just pass it along to the police department, the internal affairs group, and they sit in and watch and see what they do with it. But there's not really much else they can do.
So to our listening audience, I want people to really understand this. So we have a police oversight department currently that was established that used to be the police monitor. So the idea was that this particular group of people or this particular division in the city would take your complaint as a person who wanted to complain against a police officer would take your complaint and actually investigate the complaint.
Yeah. So
what's changed?
Well, and so I want to be real clear here because they've never really had quote unquote investigatory powers. Now, what they were able to do between 2018 and 2021 is when the complaint came in, they could take it, they would review it, and they could look at all the internal police documents about it. So if there's body cam footage, there's a police report, they could just look at that stuff, and they could be like, okay, is this a valid complaint? Should it move forward at all? And then what classification should it be? So how seriously should we treat it? And then they would send it on. They still would then send it on to internal affairs, but now they've kind of said, okay, this is serious, and you need to investigate. Or not so much, don't worry about it, or this is more like a training issue, and here's what we recommend. So they never were able to like go interview witnesses or talk to the police officer directly. They never were able to really investigate like that, but they were at least in there and looking at all these things. And then of course they also can write reports saying, look, we're getting all these complaints about this, we're getting all these complaints about that. It's clear there's something going on, even if the policy says it's okay and we're not actually disciplining the officer for doing this. It's clear a lot of people in the community don't like it because they keep complaining, and so maybe you should change the policy, right? You need to look at what's going on. So that's what the office was doing. Now, literally, it's just an intake for complaints. So they can't do even that initial review where they pull their police reports and pull their body cam. They
cannot do that any longer.
No, they just take the complaints and then they send them on to internal affairs. And internal affairs, which is other police officers, they decide fully what to do with it, what classification it gets, how to treat it. Is it serious? Is it not? Do we even investigate it? So
wow.
It's really we're in a situation now where we have very little oversight, and we have very little transparency into it too. And so we're saying, okay, look, we've been playing this game for now 22 years since the first police contract got negotiated. There were advances made during that time. Folks like Nelson and things got the police monitor, and other groups got the police monitor set up. These were big advances. We didn't even have that stuff before. But now we see, as we continue to have these issues, right, and of course with cell phone footage and everything else, we know about it even more than we used to. We need something more. And so in 2017, we said, all right, let's use this process to get something more. And then we got a little more, not all we want, but we got a little more. And then they were able to use the grievances to really diminish it down. And so now we're saying, okay, it's not clear we can get what we need through this negotiation process. And so what we would really like to do is to actually just set up the system outside of the process, not have it be negotiated like that. Let them negotiate over their wages and benefits and all that stuff. They can continue to do that just like any other labor group. But the system of oversight that determines whether or not an officer,
has harmed a citizen.
Right. That shouldn't be something that they get to decide what it looks like.
Policing themselves. Yes.
That's exactly right. And so there was a ballot measure. There was petitions collected this summer. 33,000 signatures were collected, and a ballot measure was placed on in May. And that, if passed, that will it'll recreate what we had in 2018. It'll add a little more transparency into the process than we even had then. And it would not require the police to necessarily agree to that system of changes. And so that's the situation that we're at now, where we're really hoping that this ballot measure in May will pass so that there's just a stable and strong system. They can't be negotiated away in the next contract round because they renegotiate these every 4 or 5 years. Can't be grieved away by grievances if they want to come after the police oversight office like they did.
Which is what has happened.
What they did with Farrah, right? And now she's gone. And so that's where we're at. However, we have this big issue, which is that the current police contract is up. They're negotiating it now. And they can extend the current contract, but only through the end of March, right? So the city is doing negotiations like normal, like to agree to another 4 or 5 year deal. Almost like this ballot measure isn't sitting out there, like the voters aren't going to have a say in this. And the problem is, if they agree to a new long-term deal, even if that ballot measure passes in May, it won't go into effect until that
contract is expired.
That's exactly right. So, so right now we were hopeful that maybe with that ballot measure sitting out there, the city would be able to negotiate something much stronger, like they'll have some leverage. But that's not the case. Unfortunately, what's currently on the table is more the same in a lot of ways. And so at this point, we're really hoping that some way we can bridge this gap from March to May and just make sure that we're able to let the voters decide about whether or not this new system comes into place.
So one of the things I want to understand is that currently the city manager has the power to not push this forward, knowing that this is on the ballot for May.
That's right.
Have you all thought about, or have you all had the conversations with the city manager, or was there some kind of promise, if I can say that was made prior to knowing that this was already out for the ballot? Is there something that made you believe that the city manager wouldn't push this forward? And also, I just listened to Governor Abbott. It just makes me nauseated to say that. But I just listened to him last night saying that it was one of his primary goals was to ensure funding and more strengthening of all the police departments in Texas. Do you think also, as you answer the other question, I want you to think about this too. Do you believe that that this is backlash from the worst campaign word y'all could ever been used, was defund the police? I'm just like, there should have been something else, because that defund made a lot of people nervous. So do you think that
so to your first question, the
city manager,
the ballot measure, when the signatures were being collected, the idea was for it to go on this November ballot. Unfortunately, the city clerk's office wasn't able to validate the signatures in time. Now, they were turned in, right on the edge of the, there's no deadline to turn them in. It's really just about how much time they need. But ultimately, they didn't make the deadline to have it be on this ballot. So if it had been on the November ballot, this wouldn't be an issue. Everybody would have voted on it last night.
Yeah.
If there was a, if it had won, then it would be going into effect right now. But it didn't. So now it's on May. So that's what created this situation. And we've had conversations with the city manager, and we've asked, can you do a short-term deal, just to bridge this gap. You've got a short-term deal with our emergency medical services folks right now. They only signed a 1-year contract with them. Let's do something like that so we can let the voters decide, let the will of the voters ultimately have this decide on this issue. And, he didn't commit to anything. And then really, how these negotiations go, they meet once a week, once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks for months, right? They started in February of this year. And then not long after we met with him, they started meeting multiple times a week. So he not only said, "Oh, I'll wait," he started pushing it.
Yeah.
faster. That's right. So his goal is very clear to us, which is that he doesn't want the voters to get to decide on this issue. He really wants to push a new
people.
Contract.
You need to hear this. Yeah.
He wants to push a new contract, and he doesn't. And ultimately, he's not concerned if it's not as good as what the voters could vote on in May, which is really unfortunate. And I think a lot of council people are seeing that. So the other side of this coin, obviously, you're totally right. The city manager decides, because he's the manager of the labor negotiation team that actually negotiates with the police association about the contract. So he decides whether to push this, how to push it, how to play it. But ultimately, any deal goes to the city council to approve. It goes to the police membership, and then it goes to the city council. And so when the city council put this on the ballot in May, most of them said they want to hear from the voters on this issue. So that's the other confusing part, right? Because he heard that, he knows that. And so, but he seems intent to try to test the council and put something in front of them one way or the other. And I'm hopeful that they, see this coming and pivot, because otherwise it could be a contentious vote that honestly we don't need. It doesn't need to happen. Let's just see what happens in May and then move from there. But that's where we're at. So to your second question, backlash. There's undoubtedly been a backlash, no question about that. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And as it relates to this particular issue right now, I'm not sure if that's what this is. The city manager, has kind of been on this side of this issue for his whole time there. When
I feel like Austin Justice Coalition, and I feel like they embraced him initially, and I could be real wrong. And I feel like that happens in a lot of instances. We embrace the devil. I mean, if I can just be, I feel like a lot of times we embrace things because, we want to make sure that whatever it is that we need in our communities that we're working with, working with the individual that's sitting in that seat of power. So I think, and the reason why I bring this out is because it's very hard for me to hear a person back away from somebody that you initially promoted and supported. And we do too much of that in our community. We lift people up and say that this is the person, and then when they start showing us, once they get in these seats, that they really don't support that, they really don't support our issues, they really don't care what we're saying now because they're in the seat. It's hard to backtrack away from that. So keep going. I just wanted to throw that out there.
I agree wholeheartedly that happens too often. I personally have never supported this man. And I don't know about AJC's stance. I wasn't with AJC in 2017 when he came in. But yeah, he had been in Minnesota and in Minneapolis. And we saw how they responded to Philando Castile. And obviously it's only been, the epicenter of police violence and uproar ever
George
since.
Floyd, yeah.
Of course, with George Floyd and many others. So I don't, if it's a surprise to some, it shouldn't have been. And we saw when our district attorney filed indictments against officers over the conduct in the 2020 protests. This city manager came out and said, "Oh, that's wrong. They shouldn't be indicted." I've never seen or heard of a city manager trying to interfere with a criminal thing going on over in the county. It's your employees get involved in some sort of criminal thing, or it's kind of like we're gonna let the facts play out. Like it really is baffling. So to us, it's unfortunately not surprising, or at least to me, not surprising where he's at. Now, as far as the backlash in general, clearly there's been one. I think especially at the state level, and you see it a lot in many communities around the country. You saw the district attorney in San Francisco get recalled.
Yes.
You've seen some movement in the other direction where it seemed like everything was going one way for a little bit. So I have no question that's there. You've also seen at the legislature here in Texas, there used to be this caucus called the Freedom Caucus. They were kind of more libertarian-like folks, and oftentimes they would vote with not all the Democrats, because all the Democrats wouldn't do it either, but a good healthy section of them on criminal justice reform issues. Well, that's gone. So there's really no bipartisanship on this issue now. The whole tough on crime thing, that rhetoric from the 90s is back. And one party in particular is like leading that, and that's been the case. And I think obviously the other one is responding in a lot of ways to that. And so it's definitely a tough environment. That said, I think here locally we still have a lot of opportunities. We haven't seen it near as much as far as the backlash goes, with elected officials. And I think we need to not be defeatist about it, because we still have some people in seats that can do some things and things they've promised to do, and so we need to hold them to
hold them accountable.
That's right, and keep pushing. So that's what we're gonna do.
I want to just say to you, I'm just always, I'm always enamored by the vast amount of knowledge that you have and commitment to you, to change that empowers and helps people who are the least or the lesser community continuing to be a voice. I'm bothered by the fact that we have, and I said this to Kirk Watson when he was here, we don't have one elected official that is a state rep or a senator from Austin, from Travis County, who has ever presented any legislation that has anything to do with criminal justice reform. Not one. I think the closest we may have come to someone even addressing it in our legislature has been Vicki Godwin.
Mm-hmm.
Or Goodwin, I don't know.
Goodwin,
Yeah. I always want to call her Godwin. But there's not been that. And even in when I start thinking about at the city and the county level, how many of the people that sit on the dais, how they all still have a punitive thought process when it comes to things that are criminal justice oriented, up to and including the whole thing about the police force, not so much the council, but about the police force, because they don't see a world free of police. You know, and whereas there's a lot of vision for people want to see a world free of the pain that the police put on to our community members. So when people say that you all are so much about these changes because you want to see the police go away, you want to see, you all want Austin to be chaotic, and you want it to be policed by a bunch of young people with bats. What do you say to that?
Yeah.
And as you're starting to wrap your thoughts up, what do you say to people who believe that you all have put some of the things out there to make our community be chaotic and, full of crime and full of all other rhetoric that is not conducive to the progressiveness of Austin's safe growth?
Well, one quick thing, I do want to give Senator Eckhart and congrats on your victory. A little bit of due. She did introduce the Mike Ramos Act last year.
Sorry about this, Sarah.
Yeah, all good. Or in the last session. So I think what we want is democracy in our communities and accountability to democratic institutions in our communities. And so we understand that people have needs in our communities. The people are calling our city, asking for help. They're calling 911, they're calling 311, and there need to be people to respond to those calls. Our question is, who's going to give the best response to all those calls? Who's going to actually fulfill the needs of the people that are on the other end of that call? And who's going to do it best and with the least amount of harm brought to our communities? And that's not how we've approached these issues. We've approached it by saying, the police are the be-all, end-all. We're going to train them to do everything. We're going to let them do whatever, empower them for everything. We're not going to hold them accountable to it. And if we try and they buck our district attorney, they buck the city council, they say they're not going to do it, then nothing happens. And so we don't think this is a place we can stay in and not continue to have the same issues we've seen with folks like Mike Ramos, with folks like David Joseph, and just the list goes on and on. So we want to say, hey, look, let's make sure that everyone that calls our city and has needs and asks for help gets the help they need and get it as quick as they need it. But what is it that they actually need? Do they need someone to come and resolve a conflict? Do they need someone to come and help with a mental or behavioral health crisis? Do they need someone to de-escalate a situation? Do they need someone to help someone who's unhoused get into housing or get some services? If so, then these are not tasks for police. And right now we've got a system where that's oftentimes the only person we can send. And so, yeah, they're taxed, they're overtaxed, they're overworked, they don't have enough resources, but it's partly because they've tried to make themselves too the answer to all these things. And so what we're trying to do is say, hey, look, let's.
Which is really inappropriate.
It
is.
So that's what we want. We want people to have what they need, and then we also want to say, how do we prevent a lot of these things from getting started? And we think, again, if we start with that question, what do people need? Then we'll find a lot of preventative answers in it, right? The state of the world is tough right now, and I think not enough people, and I think people look at the state of the police department here, or you can look at it in other places. You can see up or down, staffed or not staffed. Like a lot of things are getting worse. A lot of people are behaving in ways that they didn't used to. And we have to question, is this because there's not enough people in cars riding around in the neighborhood, or is it because we lost over 1 million people in the last 2 years? Have a lot of breadwinners, a lot of mentors, a lot of elders, a lot of folks in our community have just straight disappeared, and a lot of people are struggling. And I don't think we give enough account to just the upheaval that this pandemic has caused and how it's contributed. And ultimately, we want to make sure that everybody has what they need. And again, that's before the emergency, ideally, and then also during that emergency. And what we're trying to fight is to make sure that everyone gets the thing that they need when they need it, and that it's the right people that'll do the least amount of harm.
We're winding down, and I want to be able to give my shout outs and all that at the end of this, and I think I did a lot of that at the beginning, so maybe I won't do that. Shout out to everybody who's listening, but I want to know from you, Chris Harris, where is Chris Harris? What are you doing 5 years from now?
Ooh, that's a great question.
He's running for governor, y'all. Where is Chris Harris 5 years from now?
I really don't know the answer to that. I'm definitely I'm definitely raising some kids. I'm definitely here in Austin, Texas, continuing a good fight. What exactly form that takes or role that takes, I really can't answer that. I'm really, like I said, I'm being fed right now by trying to bring some new people into the work and pass along some of the things I've learned.
Excellent.
And so, I definitely want to keep doing that. And yeah, I don't know. That's a great question.
You'll get to think about that a lot. Shout out to Austin Justice Coalition for harnessing and grabbing so much of a vast amount of information and professionalism and getting you, Chris, and helping, like you said, expand the work and the depth of AJC. Shout out to the leadership there for sure. You all stand in the reins against a monumental institution of racism, exclusion. I mean, it's just, we have so much work still to do. Any final thoughts? Just anything you need to tell this listening audience that they need to know and that they definitely need to be voting on in May?
Yeah, well, there definitely will be a ballot measure, the Austin Police Oversight Act, in May. And so we're really hoping for everybody's support for that act. But before that, we really need to make sure that vote means something and that there's not a long-term deal in place that's going to prevent it from going into effect. So if you're able to go to austinjusticecoalition.org to get engaged with us there. Also, the group running the ballot measure, which I'm also involved with, Equity Action, that's equityactionatx.org, equityactionatx.org. You can get involved with the folks on the ballot measure side there. And I also just want to say that, all of your kind words mean so much to me, coming from you, and knowing the work you've done and how you've contributed to this community and so many lives. So
thank you for that.
Like, it's just, that really really speaks to me. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being on. Chris Harris, Austin Justice Coalition. And as you know, you've been listening to the Iron Sharpens Iron show, and I am your host, Latrice Cook. We'll be back with you next Wednesday. I don't know who's going to do this show. I don't know what's going to show up, but we'll be back with you on next Wednesday. Gonna bring Chris Harris back again at the top of the year so we can discuss this just a little bit more. 512-473-2525 if you need to get in touch with the Melge Justice Center for any situation related to parole or having been incarcerated. You can give us a call. Chris, one more time, what is you all's website in case people need to get into find out about the ballot measure?
Sure, it's austinjusticecoalition.org and then equityactionatx.org.
Thank you, the listening audience, for being here with us today, this afternoon on the Iron Sharpens Iron show. I am your host, Latrice Cook, and as you know, your success is important to us.